Hello, welcome everyone. Thank you
Oh,
for registering for our webinar today. You see two faces. Well, actually, you see three faces, including the slides. But my name is Nikkely, and together with Tom, we will host this webinar today. We will also give an introduction about ourselves later. Just one practicality before we start. If you have any questions, please send them in the chat. And then after the webinar, we will reserve some time to answer your questions. So the reason why you are here today is because we are going to discuss how you can quickly gather valuable insights and also turn them into concrete and actionable recommendations. So it's already a challenge to gather valuable insights, let alone in a quick manner. But the next step is also still here. And how are you going to use those insights that you gathered? So like I mentioned before, me and Tom will host this webinar. My name is Nikkely. I'm a product specialist for Crowdtech, and we are a software provider for surveys, panels, and communities. Within my role, I am responsible for knowing all the ins and the outs of the platform. And besides that, I have regular customer contact to make sure that also the needs of their customer are heard and the platform aligns with their needs. So that's in short about me. Tom, would you like to introduce yourself as well?
of course. I am Tom Kerkhof. I work for MWN2, a research company as a consultant in community research and qualitative research mostly. I use the software that Nikkely and Crowdtech provide to perform these research communities and do research with them, get the insights that we're going to talk about more later. In short.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Tom. So actually, we wanted to begin this webinar with highlighting something that we found really interesting, which is the difference in the usage of quantitative versus qualitative research. So something interesting that we notice is that there is a clear preference for quantitative research. So several reports, they show that quantitative research is used way more frequently than qualitative research. And this is partly because quantitative data is more scalable. And it's also way easier to analyze it statistically. So therefore, of course, you can allow, or it allows you to describe populations. And if we look specifically at the ASMR report, you can see that 60 till 70% of all studies are quantitative research. And also something else that's very interesting is that we can see an emerging trend in the use of mixed methods. So that means that you're using both qualitative and quantitative methods. And this mixed method approach is used for around 10 till 20% of all the studies. You can see that it really meets the need of a researcher for both statistical data, but also those contextual and qualitative insights. Now, so it's quite clear that there is a need for qualitative data. Something else that also supports that is that there was a 30% growth in the use of qualitative methods. And now there are several reasons for this growth, and we ourselves noticed a few of them. So first of all, you can see that there is a need for in-depth results, and you cannot obtain those with quantitative methods. And second of all, you can see that researchers really want to understand the feelings and the behaviors of their target group. Because if you understand those feelings and behaviors, you can actually find out why people behave in a certain manner or why they have specific preferences. And by knowing this why, it's not easier to make decisions, but it is easier to make impactful decisions. Because if you know the why, you can actually make a business decision that matter for your customers. And lastly, something that we notice is that the need for qualitative data is usually to complement. So what you could do is either before or after your quantitative research, also implement some qualitative methods. Now, like I mentioned, it's quite clear that there is a need for qualitative research, and therefore it's also worth mentioning its challenges. So we highlighted three of them. First of all, it's an investment. So qualitative methods, it requires an investment in both time, but also in cost. So for instance, if you take a look at the implementation, the preparation, the analysis, those are all time-consuming elements that is way different for quantitative methods. Second of all, it could be that you have a great team of quantitative researchers, but maybe your team does not have the right skills to do qualitative research. And lastly, I think this one is quite obvious. You cannot generalize the results of qualitative research. So with quantitative research, of course, you can make statements about the population, and you're not able to do this with qualitative research. So that brings me to the goal of today. We would like to introduce you to a pop-up community, but mainly answer the question, how can you gather in-depth results in an accessible way? And the agenda for today is that we're going to discuss what a pop-up community is, what it is used for, and then I will hand it over to Tom, who is going to present a use case, and he will define or he will discuss strategies, how you can define the target audience, which engagement strategies you can use, which research activities are relevant, and also how you can make sure that you turn those results into concrete and action-driven recommendations. And at last, we will share some tips with you to end the webinar. Now, if you take a look at the slides, we described what a pop-up community is. And as opposed to a long-term community, a pop-up community is a temporary online group of people brought together to gather insights on a specific topic, product, or brand. And these communities, they are set up for a limited time. It's often a few days to a few weeks, and they serve as a dynamic and interactive environment in which you quickly obtain feedback from your target audience. And now this pop-up community, it is an online environment, and community members, they have their own account, and by that they can log in and they can participate in various research activities on this specific platform. Now that we kind of know what a pop-up community is, it's also important to understand what it is used for. So first of all, pop-up communities, they are targeted. So these communities, they focus on specific topics or specific research questions. So for example, they can be used to gather feedback on a new product concept or a marketing campaign or a brand experience. And second of all, they are interactive. So community members, they are actively involved in discussions, in surveys, in polls, but also other research activities. And this really helps to gain those in-depth insights that go beyond superficial answers. In addition to that, the platform's engagement techniques, it also makes it a fun experience for the respondent to participate in research. And the third point is that you can gather feedback in a very efficient way. So pop-up communities, they are ideal for getting quick and also up-to-date insights because they offer a direct line to your target audience. And if you compare it, for instance, to traditional qualitative methods, you do not have this direct line with your target group. For instance, if you compare it concretely to interviews, you can see that a pop-up community is an accessible way for the respondent to participate in research, but it's also more accessible for you as a researcher. And a concrete example of that is that, for instance, the results, they are organized in a very efficient manner. You can download them straight away. And this process takes more time with traditional qualitative methods. And besides that, pop-up communities are flexible. So you can use it for different research needs, such as product testing. You can do diary studies, customer satisfaction surveys, campaign testing. So it can really be set up to suit your specific research needs. And lastly, which is most important, is that you can gather in-depth results. Because the interactive nature of pop-up communities, it allows for detailed discussion, but also those contextual insights that go beyond the superficial answers. And this is really the core of a community. So therefore, you can also not generalize the results, which I mentioned earlier. But because it's an online environment, they do offer the opportunity to reach more people than when you compare it to traditional qualitative methods. So I hope by this that you have a clearer understanding of what a pop-up community is, also what it is used for. And then now I would like to hand it over to you, Tom. He will then further elaborate and also share several examples to show you how you can actually gather those valuable insights with the pop-up community. So Tom,
Yes.
over to
Yes,
you.
thank you, Nikkely. Yes. So today I want to talk a little bit about what a pop-up community looks like in practice. So what do you need to consider when you're setting one up? But also, of course, most importantly, the insights you can gain from it. And to do so, I'll use an example of a recent project that we ran for the Hersenstichting. In short, the Hersenstichting is a non-profit organization, aims to support people with brain conditions to help them be part of society, to support research on treatments or causes of brain conditions. And they want to do a pop-up community focused specifically on people experiencing sensory overload or overstimulation due to their neurological conditions. I have to say it was a very interesting, also a rewarding project. I think a very good example of how impactful a pop-up community can be. And that's why we would like to use that as an example. So like defined before, if you start a pop-up community, you have to start with a research goal. Every community starts with a research objective. It has to be clear, because why do you want to even start this community in the first place? In this particular case, the Hersenstichting wanted to better understand the needs specifically of people that were living with a sensory overload and what they would experience on a daily basis. And they wanted to use those insights to help shape the organization's strategic priorities for the upcoming years. Whether that meant investing in research or improving public communication, they wanted to give a direction to their strategy, which is a very broad research goal for sure. But the scope of the community makes it so that it remains manageable because the target group was clearly defined. There's only people that specifically suffer from sensory overload and a neurological condition. So what did they want to uncover? What kind of questions were they after to be answered? Well, it focused mostly on real life experiences. So what do people with sensory overload face on a daily basis? What challenges do they encounter? What kind of support would really help them? And of course, ultimately also, what role can the Hersenstichting play in that? How can they help them? You generate qualitative insights in how this feels to people and how it affects their lives. And then these results would later be used for a quantitative follow-up. So we could do the same sort of study amongst a larger group to validate the results. An important part when you start a community is also a setup, the community setup, and the duration. In this particular case, the participants were recruited using a panel agency, but also through the Hersenstichting's own network. So we had a very small but very engaged group of about 30 people who would participate for 3 weeks in this community, short and intense, frequent questions and assignments, but also very detailed responses. And an important thing I would like to say for this particular case, because this is very interesting, is how it was designed. I think usually communities are often branded with a basic layout or a styled layout in the organization's branding. But in this particular case, because of the target audience, it had to be designed in a way that wasn't overstimulating. So participants, in this case, couldn't tolerate too much screen time. They struggled reading long text. They struggled reading long questions, so the questions needed to be concise. So the whole platform had to be sober and simple. So minimal contrasts, limited imagery, short blocks of text. Which is an interesting way of showing that sometimes you really need to do the preparation to understand exactly who you're doing the community for. So your target audience, very important. Then, of course, when you have all that done, so you have the research goal defined, you have your community set up, you start with the fieldwork phase, which is the most important phase, because that's where you gain all your insights. And I think an important thing, or the most important thing here, is engagement, to keep people engaged. In order to keep gaining those insights, you have to keep people participating in all throughout the whole duration with every assignment. Make sure that they keep engaged. I think a good way to start doing this is expectation management. So from the first invitation up until the welcome message, you have to be clear. What can participants expect? How long will the project last? How often will there be new activities? And are there any incentives? Those are all questions that participants might have and might be motivated by. So let them know beforehand so they know what they're up for. And in this particular case, for example, in the Hersenstichting, we decided to launch activities every Tuesday, every Thursday morning, very clear rhythm, which helped the people set expectations. So they know exactly when they could expect a new assignment. We, of course, told them they had more time to respond. They didn't have to do it right then. They could still respond to older topics as well, but it really helped them keep waiting for new assignments. And we also found that they were actually doing that, and many people seemed ready to engage in a new assignment, which is exactly what you would want. I mentioned incentives shortly. Before, I think it depends on the group if you need them. Some groups are highly motivated by them. In this use case, they were very intrinsically motivated, which is the ideal situation. People who are intrinsically motivated are more likely to respond to everything you ask them or to participate in all assignments. And many of these, we did actually offer them incentives and also the option to fund it back to the Hersenstichting. And many chose to do so, which goes to show that they were very intrinsically motivated. If you can get that, you're off to a good start. Then once you've set the expectations and you've invited everyone and you're really starting, I think it's very important to create a warm and safe environment from the beginning. So start off light, an introduction topic where everyone introduces themselves seems like a pleasantry, but I think it's very important because these people are going to talk to each other as well, not only to the researchers, but also to each other, whilst they don't know each other. And know nothing about each other, but are asked to share potentially personal details about themselves or about their lives. So it really helps if they know who everyone is and they have faces with some image of who everyone is, and also who the moderator is, and that they are going to constantly be engaging with. It's the person representing your organization, the person guiding your conversations. So I think it's very important to make sure that that you have this connection from the start as much as you can. Of course, it's a good start, but keeping engagement is where the real work begins. So how can you do that? There's several ways to keep everyone engaged. Partially, it's well-designed assignments, that making the questions interesting or the assignments interesting is a big part of it. But I also think that active moderation really helps. And a key principle is do not just respond to the best answers or the answers that really interest you as a researcher, but try to answer to everyone you can. So don't single people out. Don't ignore people that may not have answers that are really useful to you in your eyes at first glance, but try to really keep everyone engaged. People who never get asked follow-up questions are more likely to lose interest or to feel like they're not part of the community. So really it's your job, I think, as a community moderator and researcher to really make sure that everyone is actively engaged and is heard also by you as a moderator. You don't have to respond to every single post, of course. When I say that, you can of course only take the real something where you really have anything to add. But you do have to do it enough so that everyone feels that they are part of it. I think that's the most important takeaway. Interesting way to do this as well is draw attention to responses that you think are interesting and other people can also respond to. Inviting them to respond to someone else, like Stephen raised an interesting point. How do you all feel about this? There's several ways you can do this so that every every participant is also like notified of this, and then they can all share and react to this. Do be careful. Some people don't want all the attention, but in general, it's good to do it when someone really says something meant for the whole group. It's your role to put attention to that. Also, I think actively responding means that you have to be present as well. And present, I mean, don't wait until the end of the day to reply, but try to keep checking in, try to keep reading and take an active role. Because then you get real conversations, and then people are way more likely to respond back, and you can get into some form of depth instead of a simple question answer. You want to have a conversation if you can. It's not an interview, but it can go well into something like that if you put enough effort in. So I think that is very important. And also encourage conversation. Make sure that not only you respond to the other participants, but also invite them to react to each other, and just keep engaged. Make it a group effort as much as you can. I think that way you can get the opinions and the feelings of many people in one topic. And I think that's the most valuable thing you can do with a pop-up community. So then I have ideas for techniques that you can use. There's a lot of different research techniques that you can do to keep a community engaging. Like I said, make the assignments interesting. I think you shouldn't try to keep it too formal or heavy, especially even when the topic is serious. You should try to make it a little bit light or a little bit imaginative. Provoke some thought or invite people to really think about something. There's many ways you can do this. Examples are, for example, a designer assignment where someone has to imagine the role of a designer and design a product or design a solution to something. Or, which we used in the case with the Hersenstichting, a magic wand exercise, which essentially the question in this exercise was, if you could redesign the world so that your sensory overload no longer bothered you, not that you were rid of it, but that the world changed in such a way that your sensory overload wouldn't be an issue anymore, what would you change? What would the world look like? And this, of course, it is a broad question, and it does give you answers that aren't very practical, but what it also does is remove any practical barriers people feel, and it really allows them to lay bare their core needs, something that they really believe in and that they need. And it's a very interesting way to get to see how they think they are limited by their condition. And it's a very powerful way to surface those deeper insights. It's also very fun for most people because they have to really think about this and ponder. The answers you get are long, they are insightful, and it's always very interesting to see how they react to each other. And that's just one example. In this case, we also use a simple question like, what is it like to be you? Just a deeply personal question, but it invites participants to describe exactly what it means to have an overstimulation, a chronic overstimulation in the day-to-day life. So there's very many ways you can do this. But I think an important way or important thing to keep in mind when you do all this is make sure that it is a community. So you have to keep it a community, which I believe means you should mostly use group-based assignments. So don't try to do individual things. Avoid using like surveys or topics that really are just one specific person's experiences, but always try to invite others to think along or to be able to react to this. There is ways you can do this, even if you do want individual output, because there are, of course, questions that you don't want it to be a group discussion. You want people to give their own input and then think along with everyone else. And one such method is a hybrid topic. A hybrid topic is essentially a topic where someone has to submit their own answer first, then they can read the answers of everyone else. So they have to first think about it themselves, then they can check everyone else's responses and see if something there resonates with them, or if they really agree, maybe they really disagree. I think it's very important to check in afterwards and to really encourage anyone to read each other's messages, not just submit their own answer and then call it a day, but really check everyone else. Make sure that you check back in and ask people to do this. I think that gives you the best insight. A staircase is also an interesting thing to use. What is a staircase? It's essentially a mini survey you can do. So it's a little short questionnaire, but it's in a topic form. So people get questions, but as a moderator, you can respond to every single answer if you want to gain more insights. So you can start a conversation based on their answers. A normal survey does not allow you to do that. So you have to just take every answer at face value, but here you can go in deep if you'd like. But I do think it's important, especially with the staircase, but basically for every topic, is that even though your curiosity might be sparked and you see so many interesting things and people say all kinds of things you want to keep asking questions about, I think it's important not to keep doing this constantly. Don't ask 20 questions in one topic. Don't respond to every question in a staircase. You won't get good answers if you overload participants. You have to really make it seem like you have truly read and understood what they say. If you don't, ask them for a clarification. Just make sure that it feels like you're genuinely interested in their answers. And I don't think asking 20 questions is doing that. Also, they're never going to answer to all and each and every question. So keep it limited as much as you can. So yeah, actually, in summary, I would say the most important thing is your research goal. It shapes everything from the design until up to the activities and the type of participants that you'd like to invite. Keep in mind that you will always get qualitative insights. If you want rich, personal, and open-ended responses, this is exactly the platform you need. It might give you insight into things that you've not considered before and cover pain points, motivations, their emotional experiences as well. You should always realize that it's not a quantitative tool, and it cannot be. So it's never a generalized source of information. All you will get is people's feelings and the reasoning behind their wants, their needs, or their experiences. Of course, I do want to give you some examples of those insights based on the case we had for the Hersenstichting. So what did we uncover? I can't go into details about every specific thing that we uncovered. Some of that's confidential, but I do want you to give some insight. For example, it was all based, like I said at the start, on people's personal and day-to-day experiences with overstimulation, but also their needs and how the Hersenstichting could help. And one of the things we really found is that participants didn't so much want solutions as that they wanted society to better understand what it means to have sensory overload. If you experience that daily, if you are in the supermarket and you just can't function anymore because things around you are just too much, and you freeze, how does that feel? Because we felt that an example they gave was that something like, I'm so overstimulated. People say like, oh, I'm overstimulated. It's something you hear a lot, but it's used so casually, even by people who do not at all have chronic symptoms. And they felt that really undermines their own experiences and also makes it very hard for society at large to take overstimulation seriously, while people who chronically suffer from this just are hampered in everyday life by what they experience, much more so than people realize. And just that realization, sort of like the idea that other people could better understand what they feel, was more important to them, perhaps even than a solution. Of course, they want to get rid of what they feel, but they were not that realistic about this. Like, okay, we don't know how we can solve it right now, but we could really be helped if people just have more patience, more understanding, and we don't have to constantly explain what it means to be to suffer from overstimulation or sensory overload, which is an insight that the Hersenstichting wasn't fully aware of. They knew people were thinking that way, but they were really focused, of course, on solutions and things that they could do, like maybe they want more information, or they could help them better with treatments or things like that. But this was really something that stood out very strongly. So yeah, just beyond the funding of research and care, really focus on public awareness, education, simply because the recognition is so important to the people that they want to support. So that's a really interesting thing that they gathered and didn't expect before. They also tried this, like I said before, they did quantitative research afterwards to validate it, and we did that as well, MEM2. And they showed the same results. So lots of the people were thinking the same, had the same idea, but the questionnaires were based on the insights of the pop-up community, and therefore would have been different if we had did that before. If we had made a questionnaire before these insights, it would probably have been focused too much on like the predetermined notion of what people needed, rather than using the insights actively to understand if this was something people were really thinking, even in broader terms. So if a larger population actually felt the same way. There's one thing that I also want to say, which we said before as well. I think Nikkely said time investment is very important. I do feel that it is important to say that again. Pop-up communities are a very powerful tool. I think they allow you to gain qualitative insights in a shorter amount of time and an easier and more accessible way than just general qualitative research does. But it doesn't mean they don't require time. They do. They do require a lot of time, dedicated time and effort, especially from researchers who act as moderators. Especially if your community is highly active, it's something you have to stay on top of. So use it, but take it seriously is the thing I want to just want to make sure I bring across. Yeah, I think that's mostly concludes the story for now. I have a lot of more things I could say, but we have to keep it a little bit short. So that's it for now.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much, Tom. I think a very clear story and especially very concrete explanation on how you can utilize a pop-up community and really like gather those in-depth results. Like I think you gave a perfect example of how the Hersenstichting really gained those in-depth results and made like the decision to focus on that. So great to hear. Thank you. It brings us to the end of the webinar. So the goal of today was to introduce you to a pop-up community and also demonstrate how you can gather the in-depth results, but also in an accessible way. So possible next steps for you after this webinar is ask yourself the question, are you in need of more detailed results within your organization? And then maybe you can already start asking your customers if they are open to participating in a community. And then if you like more information about a pop-up community, feel free to request it. I will also share my contact details, but also Tom's contact details. So if you have any questions left, feel free to send us an email. And last but not least, just give it a try because it's a very accessible way to gather qualitative results. So of course, it's like Tom mentioned, it's effort from your side in terms of thinking about the content and the research questions, etc. But it's a short duration, and compared to other qualitative methods, it's a very accessible way to gather those in-depth results. So you can always assess if it delivers the desired outcomes. So you can just give it a try. And if you have any questions left, like I said, you can email us, but you can also send them in the chat. So I will take a look now at our chat. And in the meantime, I will share our contact details. So if maybe anything else pops up, if you do not have a question at the moment, but later on you feel like, yeah, you would like to share something or ask us something, feel free to reach out.
Yes.
So I see one question in the
Yeah.
chat. Thank you so much. The question is, how many customers are the minimum to start a pop-up community? Maybe Tom, you can answer this question.
Yes, I can. It's a great question.
Mm.
I think there isn't really a minimum. I've done pop-up communities with 10 to 15 people. I've done communities with 30 people, 50, 100. I mean, there's no real strict rules. I think you can more easily have too many rather than too few. So I think 15, for example, is a great number to start. Then you can go really in depth on your subjects and the questions. There's no strict minimum, but I think 10 to 15, you do want to have at least that. I think 30 is usually a great number to go for.
And maybe also interesting to discuss the maximum because you're saying like 100, for instance. That's
Mhm.
also it's quite a lot for a
Yep.
pop-up community, especially because of course, Tom, I also know you manage some long-term communities. Could you maybe explain a bit what the difference, in the number of members is between a long-term community and a pop-up community?
Yes, good, it's a good question. Long-term communities, the thing is they have a lot of short projects across a longer period of time. So you want to have a group of people that is larger. You want more people in that community simply because then you have more different target audiences because you have a demographic, but every single project you do in a long-term community can require different subgroups, and you need to have those. So you have to have a larger group of people to be able to have enough people for each and every research project. You don't always use everyone in the community if you have a long-term community. But in a pop-up, you want to use everyone there is. It's only 3 weeks. You're not going to invite someone for them not to participate, and your target audience is already known. And then I think if you have 100 people in a 3 week period and they all participate, then you're having a day job trying to answer to every one of them.
Hmm.
It's very interesting, but it's practicality. No, I wouldn't say it's a practical thing to do, but so I would say that is a maximum. But then again, technically it's possible. Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
It's not technically impossible, but I wouldn't advise it if you only have 3 weeks. It's qualitative research. Quantity is for another type of research, I would say.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
So, like the core difference between a pop-up and a long-term community in terms of the number of members for you is that with a pop-up community is very targeted. So you already have like the same kind of demographics, for instance, and with a long-term community, the goal is to have like a more broad audience that you can ask different kind of research questions to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're a commercial brand and you have a long-term community, you use this to be able to ask all kinds of questions on everyone who's a potential customer, which could be a very broad and varied demographic. Uh, but if you do a pop-up community, it's usually one single product or one single part of the grand scheme you do. and then you don't necessarily have, sometimes you do, but you don't generally have all your potential customers in mind, but just a slice of them. And then you just don't need as many people. I think that is a practical way to describe it.
Yeah, makes sense. Thank you. Okay, if there are no questions left for now, then I would like to thank you all for attending. And also, Tom, thank you so much for presenting with me. And like I said, if there's any question that pops up, feel free to reach out to us. Okay, and have a
All
lovely
right.
day. Bye,
Yeah.
everyone.
Have a lovely day. Bye.
Bye-bye.